Welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Sarah Wong. Hong Kong's gross domestic product shrank by 4% in the first quarter this year, marking one of its worst performances in the past 30 years. The dismal figure prompted the government to downgrade the full-year forecast for economic growth to as low as 1%. How should Hong Kong adhere to the dynamic zero policy and navigate geopolitical uncertainties without losing the allure of an international financial hub? Heiwai Tang, Director of Asia Global Institute and Economics Professor at the University of Hong Kong, joins me now. Professor, welcome to Talk the Walk.
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah.
Now, Heiwai, first of all, I believe that congratulations are in order on your appointment as the Director of Asia Global Institute, and congratulations. We'll talk.
Thank you.
I want to talk about that later, but first of all, 4% contraction, downgraded full-year economic growth forecast. What do you make of these figures? How bad is the situation, and how much worse it's going to get?
I guess we are not surprised about the negative economic growth. This is the GDP number for Hong Kong in the first quarter of this year compared to the first quarter of last year. Given the low economic activities due to, I would say, draconian pandemic controls, most of the services, I would say, went down substantially. If you look at retail sales, for example, compared to a year ago, the quarterly number was down by over 13%. So the food and beverage sector obviously is the hardest hit sector. But luckily, financial services, which is the most important high-end service sector in this city, was still doing quite okay. Many of my colleagues in the financial industry were still able to work at home and work remotely. So if you look at different sectors, and some of them require more face-to-face interaction, and they were hit hardest. Some of them were able to be done online, and based on different types of technologies, they were doing quite okay. And so the 4% number to me is not surprising, and it's sort of expected.
Obviously, we're looking at the government, the role that the government policy play, like you said, draconian lockdowns, COVID restrictions in Hong Kong and also in mainland China. And also we're also looking at extraordinary time of external shocks here, geopolitical uncertainties, war in Ukraine, supply chain disruptions, and of course, the tightening monetary policy around the world in the US and Europe. Walk us through how the macroeconomic environment, for example, a global cycle of tightening monetary policy impacts Hong Kong's economic strength and its competitiveness in this particular macroeconomics environment?
This is a very interesting question because you relate global monetary policies to the competitiveness of Hong Kong. Most of us would not think about that relationship naturally. But you're absolutely right that when major central banks around the world started to tighten their money supply, it would dry up quite a lot of liquidity in the market. And we have already seen the direct impact on the Hong Kong stock market, as well as the strength of the Hong Kong dollar. The high interest rate in the US after the Federal Reserve over there increased their rate twice to close to 1% right now, has attracted quite a lot of capital outflows from Hong Kong and other countries, by the way, back to the United States or to markets that were US dollar based. So as a result, if we look at the investment environment here in Hong Kong, in other emerging markets or in mainland China today, the situation has become more challenging compared to last year for sure. But that said, I think if Hong Kong could grasp this opportunity to strengthen its economy, to rebuild its economy, to diversify its economic structure in particular, try to allocate the resources in a more efficient way to sectors that will generate more economic benefit and generate more productivity for the city, I would say, this is just a short-term pain for Hong Kong. But, if someone was looking forward to generating the kind of financial return that we had last year or 2 years ago, it would be quite challenging this year due to, as you said, the tightening monetary policy that has become, the new norm for this year and probably for the next 2 years. And advanced economies, including the United States and various European countries, were facing historically high inflation, and some people even argue that this is the beginning of stagflation for certain economies, and stagflation can easily last for a few years. Remember the 70s when there was an oil crisis, again, due to interstate conflict. The US took almost 7 years to come out from that stagflation, eventually came out from stagflation in the mid-80s. So I'm not saying that this time stagflation will last for as long, but fasten your seatbelt and be prepared for more aggressive monetary tightening in the next few years, especially in the US and in the European Union.
Well, looking back in Hong Kong, as you mentioned, it may be a short-term pain for Hong Kong right now, but it's a long-term paradox for Hong Kong to be squeezed, to be placed in a position between the global capitalist system and while it's seeking policy alignment with the mainland. And the reason you're very kind to note I asked the question between the global tightening policy cycle and Hong Kong's economic strength and competitiveness. And the reason I asked that is because I wonder how Hong Kong can navigate the macroeconomic turbulence with its financial system deeply embedded within the global capitalist system. For example, it's the Hong Kong dollar is pegged with the US dollar, and we've now seen lackluster economic figures like industrial output and retail sales, consumer spending, these numbers coming out of China. And I wonder how insulated is a Hong Kong embedded and in lockstep with Western capitalist system? How insulated is a Hong Kong from the economic turmoil or slowing economic performance from China?
So Hong Kong is a small open economy, and it is tightly connected with different sectors in mainland China. If you allow me to tell you some historical numbers, in 1997, Hong Kong's GDP was around 17% of the entire Chinese economy. Today, Hong Kong's GDP accounted for around 2% of mainland Chinese economy. So the two things that you can conclude based on this comparison. First, Hong Kong is less important for mainland China compared to 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And second, mainland China is a lot more important economically for Hong Kong. So if you look at trade, for example, Hong Kong's export had over 99% being re-export. And out of the 99% re-export, close to half of them were originating from mainland China. So, when we are talking about lockdowns in Shanghai and other cities in mainland China, those, slow down export will immediately be reflected in slower export growth in Hong Kong. Financially speaking, we also have seen a lot more companies that had headquarters in China, mainland China, or had the major market in mainland China being listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. In addition to that, due to different financial initiatives launched by different financial institutions and regulators in Hong Kong, now people can buy Chinese stocks and bonds in Hong Kong, and vice versa, that people can buy Hong Kong stocks in Shanghai. So the connectivity in the financial market and in the real economy between Hong Kong and mainland China had increased substantially. In addition to that, mainland Chinese economy has become much more important for Hong Kong, and I would say anything that happened in mainland China will significantly affect the Hong Kong situation. If you allow me to say one more thing, and that is, Hong Kong being an international financial hub, and we had many years of history doing business with the West, and people still consider Hong Kong as a gateway between the mainland Chinese economy and the rest of the world. Given the geopolitical situation, the U.S.-China trade war that started in 2018, as well as the current European crisis, talking about the Russo-Ukrainian war, all those volatility will obviously affect Hong Kong status as a financial center of the world, as well as the Hong Kong economy that is heavily dependent on foreign capital and heavily dependent on the financial market.
All right, well, let's take a short break here. We'll talk more about the Hong Kong's economic environment and during the COVID pandemic and more after the break.